Top translators from 9 countries, including China, Russia, and the United Kingdom, were locked in the basement of a villa to translate a best-selling novel titled Daedalus. To prevent the contents of the novel from being leaked, all 9 translators were thoroughly searched upon entering the villa and had to surrender their mobile phones. During the 2 months of work that followed, they were not allowed to step out of the basement nor have any contact with the outside world. The entire villa was also completely disconnected from the internet. However, unexpectedly, despite such stringent security measures, the content of the novel was still leaked. So, by what means did the leaker manage to leak the novel's contents? I invite you to watch this suspenseful recap until the end to discover the unexpected twists. Before uncovering the answer to the question, we first need to briefly understand some background information about the novel Daedalus and the identities of the 9 translators. Daedalus is a trilogy. The first 2 installments were global bestsellers and became phenomenal hits. As a result, fans eagerly anticipated the final chapter of the series. Conservative estimates from professional organizations predicted that the final chapter of Daedalus would generate sales of a staggering 1 billion euros. What's even more intriguing is that the identity of the novel's author, Oscar Brack, remains extremely mysterious. Having never appeared in public, fans don't even know Oscar's gender or age. The only person known to have had contact with Oscar is an elderly publisher named Angstrom. The first 2 books of Daedalus were exclusively published by Angstrom's publishing house. Not long ago, Angstrom once again obtained the publication rights for the final chapter of the novel directly from Oscar. He then set out to ensure that its release would be synchronized worldwide. This was to prevent piracy issues arising from differences in publication dates. To that end, Angstrom invited top translators from 9 countries to translate the final chapter of Daedalus in a 2-month project. To ensure the novel's content wouldn't be leaked, the 9 translators were thoroughly searched by security guards upon entering the villa where they would work. All of their mobile phones and other electronic devices were confiscated. After a brief rest inside the villa, Angstrom's secretary, Rosemary, led the translators to a heavily fortified door. Behind that door was the basement where they would live and work for the next 2 months. Although completely cut off from the outside world, the basement was surprisingly spacious. Each person had a private bedroom, and there were also shared facilities such as a dining room, library, swimming pool, and gym. Finally, Angstrom outlined the workflow for the translators. Each day, he would distribute 20 pages of the manuscript in printed form for translation. They were expected to complete the entire 480-page manuscript within 1 month. During the second month, they would polish and proofread the translated material. During this period, no one was allowed to leave the basement, a measure to prevent any leaks. The 9 translators were extremely dissatisfied with this prison-like working environment and voiced their protests. Unexpectedly, Angstrom completely ignored their complaints. Instead, he brought in 2 armed bodyguards to intimidate them. Unwilling to risk confrontation, the 9 had no choice but to comply with the agreement they had signed and began their work as instructed. Time flew by, and 2 weeks later, over half of the novel had been translated. Over that time, the 9 translators, each from a different country, gradually became familiar with one another. They were Alex, a young man from the UK, Katerina, a long-haired woman from Russia, Dario, a young man from Italy, Helene, a middle-aged woman from Denmark, Javier, a bespectacled guy from Spain, Ingrid, a curly-haired girl from Germany, Kadrinos, a white-bearded old man from Greece, Telma, a buzz-cut girl from Portugal, Chen, a young man from China. That day happened to be Christmas. To celebrate, Angstrom arranged a lavish dinner for the translators. Everyone gathered to eat, drink, and enjoy the festivities. The atmosphere was warm and joyful. No one could have imagined that a life-threatening crisis was silently closing in on them. That evening, while Angstrom was enjoying his meal alone, he suddenly received an anonymous email. A mysterious person claimed to have obtained the manuscript of the final chapter of Daedalus. If Angstrom didn't want the content to be leaked, he would have to pay a hush fee of 5 million euros. To prove he wasn't bluffing, the mysterious sender had already leaked the first 10 pages of the manuscript online. The email threatened that if Angstrom didn't transfer the full amount to the specified account within 24 hours, the next 100 pages would be made public. At first, Angstrom thought it was just a prank, but after clicking on the link attached to the email, he realized the sender was telling the truth. The content of the leaked first 10 pages was word for word identical to the manuscript the 9 translators were working on. It was only then that Angstrom realized how serious the situation had become. Other than the author Oscar and Angstrom himself, only the 9 translators had seen the manuscript. The author obviously wouldn't leak it, and Angstrom would never do such a thing either. That left only one possibility. The leak came from one of the 9 translators. Angstrom immediately ordered the bodyguards to search every corner of the basement, including the rooms of all 9 translators, but no internet-connected device was found. The only suspicious item discovered was a stack of handwritten pages in Danish, hidden in a drawer in the room of Helene, the middle-aged woman from Denmark. Helene explained that these were just a novel she had been working on during her free time. Angstrom had them translated, and indeed her story had nothing to do with Daedalus. However, according to the contract the translators had signed, they were not allowed to work on any other projects during the Daedalus assignment. Unreasonable as ever, Angstrom tossed Helene's manuscript into the fireplace and burned it, mockingly calling her writing utter nonsense. After that unpleasant incident, the 9 translators gathered again that night, but the atmosphere had changed. The trust and harmony from before were gone. Everyone had heard from Angstrom that the manuscript had been leaked, and now they were suspicious of each other. The main target of suspicion was Javier, the bespectacled guy from Spain. Why? Because he had a plaster cast on his left wrist. When asked how he got injured, he gave a vague and evasive answer. Furthermore, during the body search, the guards hadn't inspected the inside of his cast. Some began to suspect he had smuggled an internet device hidden inside the cast. To test the theory, the group ripped the cast off by force, ignoring Javier's pleas, but they found nothing inside. At the same time, Angstrom's suspicions turned to Alex, the young man from the UK. In the past, Alex had illegally translated the first 2 Daedalus novels and uploaded his versions online, garnering over 10 million downloads. Angstrom had originally planned to sue Alex for copyright infringement, but Alex argued he was just a superfan of the series. He claimed that the official English translations failed to capture the author's true intent, so he created his own versions out of passion. To avoid prosecution, Alex offered to help Angstrom translate the final chapter for free. Angstrom initially refused but was shocked when Alex accurately guessed parts of the final chapter's plot, even without having seen the manuscript. This demonstrated a deep understanding of the author's thinking. What's more, Alex's fan-made translations had been more popular than the official versions online. So, despite his concerns, Angstrom reluctantly added Alex to the team. Now, with the leak, Angstrom couldn't help but suspect Alex again. He sent his secretary Rosemary to investigate Alex's background in the UK, but before she could uncover anything useful, the 24-hour deadline from the blackmailer was about to expire. Still, Angstrom had no intention of giving in. He was convinced that the leaker was one of the 9 translators. As long as he kept a close watch on them, he believed he could prevent the rest of the manuscript from leaking. Following this logic, Angstrom ordered his 2 armed guards to forcibly strip the 9 translators of their outer clothing and make them stand in a line. Despite feeling deeply humiliated, the 9 had no choice but to endure it in silence. Just as Angstrom thought there was no way the blackmailer could act under his nose, a second email arrived right on schedule. The sender claimed to have uploaded the first 100 pages of the manuscript online. If Angstrom didn't transfer 20 million euros to the specified account within 6 hours, the entire novel would be exposed. Angstrom was completely stunned. All 9 translators were in plain sight, and none of them could possibly be sending emails at that moment, unless the email had been scheduled in advance. But here's the problem. The translation was only halfway complete. At this point, the 9 translators had only read up to page 240 of the manuscript. Yet the blackmailer claimed that if the ransom wasn't paid, they would leak the full novel. If the blackmailer was one of the translators, then either they were bluffing or they had access to the full manuscript from another source. At this point, Angstrom turned his suspicion toward Katerina, the girl from Russia. Katerina had a graceful and striking appearance that closely resembled the female lead in the novel. Because of this, Angstrom had previously wanted to invite her to participate in the launch event for the new Daedalus book. And so, before the translation project even began, Angstrom had specially asked his secretary Rosemary to bring Katerina to his office to discuss her possible appearance at the new book launch. At the time, Angstrom was in the inner room of the office, taking a long phone call. When he finished the call and came out, he saw that Katerina had already been waiting in the office for a while. This led Angstrom to suspect that Katerina might have peeked at the manuscript during that time. After all, the locked briefcase containing the manuscript had been sitting right on the desk. Although he couldn't be certain that Katerina was the blackmailer who leaked the pages, Angstrom openly questioned her in front of everyone. Katerina immediately denied having looked at the manuscript, but the hot-tempered Italian man, Dario, didn't give her a chance. After hearing Angstrom's suspicions, he grabbed Katerina by the hair, demanding she tell the truth. The others rushed forward to break up the fight, and chaos broke out among the group. Angstrom watched the internal conflict among the 9 translators with cold indifference. To further break them psychologically and force them to turn on the real culprit, Angstrom made a ruthless decision. He cut off their food, drinking water, and electricity. With no lights or power, the 9 were left to rely on a few scented candles for illumination. In this suffocating and dim environment, Helene, the middle-aged translator from Denmark, was the first to have a mental breakdown. As it turns out, the manuscript that Angstrom had burned earlier had been Helene's emotional lifeline. Since her youth, Helene had dreamed of becoming a novelist, but life got in the way. Marriage, children, responsibilities, and she had to give up on that dream, choosing instead to work as a freelance translator for the flexibility. Over the years, she felt her creativity and imagination had faded. This translation job had finally pulled her out of the mire of domestic routine. She hoped to use her spare time to finish a novel she had been planning for years. But before she could complete it, Angstrom burned the manuscript in front of everyone, dismissing it as utter trash, a huge blow to Helene. Now, with no food, water, or light, Helene couldn't take the combined mental and physical torment any longer. She took a bedsheet and hanged herself from a beam in the library. When the other 8 translators discovered her body, they were all shocked and horrified. Even Angstrom, when he arrived at the scene, didn't expect that someone would actually die, but his bigger concern was still the identity of the blackmailer. As the 6-hour deadline from the previous email drew to a close, Angstrom received a third email right on time. This time, the blackmailer only gave him 20 minutes and raised the ransom to 80 million euros. If Angstrom didn't transfer the money to the designated account in time, the entire novel would be posted online. Angstrom was thrown into a frenzy of panic and rage. If the full novel was leaked, he would lose hundreds of millions of euros. On the surface, the smart move seemed to be paying the blackmailer to prevent disaster. But Angstrom was far too furious and prideful to hand over such a large sum. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a gun from one of his bodyguards and threatened to kill all 8 remaining translators unless the blackmailer revealed themselves immediately. Seeing that Angstrom had completely lost control and might actually start killing them, Alex stepped forward and confessed he was the one who had been sending the blackmail emails. Alex explained that he had set up an automated script on his laptop to send the emails at specific times. So even if Angstrom killed him now, the entire manuscript would still be exposed, unless Angstrom immediately transferred the 80 million euros to the specified account. At that very moment, Rosemary, who was investigating Alex in the UK, called Angstrom. She revealed that all the identity and address information Alex had previously provided to Angstrom were completely fake. Other than that, she couldn't find any real background information on him. Upon hearing this, Angstrom furiously cursed Rosemary over the phone. Then, in a shocking move, he turned the gun and shot the Russian woman, Katerina, in the abdomen, forcing Alex to give up his real address so Rosemary could get there in time to shut down his laptop's auto process. Everyone was stunned by Angstrom's insanity. Even the 2 bodyguards beside him hadn't expected that Angstrom would actually shoot someone. Seeing Katerina gravely wounded and in danger of dying at any moment, Alex had no choice but to reveal his real home address and begged Angstrom to send Katerina to the hospital. But it was already too late. The bullet had hit a vital organ, and soon after, Katerina bled to death. Angstrom, however, ignored her death, focusing only on remotely directing Rosemary in the UK to hurry to Alex's home and terminate the automated email program. Rosemary soon arrived and found Alex's laptop. Angstrom, relieved, immediately changed his tone. He apologized to everyone for his earlier violent behavior and excitedly told Rosemary over the phone that as long as she shut down the auto process, he would give her a raise and promotion. But it turned out Alex had anticipated this exact scenario. Next to his laptop, he had left a photo of Angstrom scolding Rosemary. When Rosemary saw the picture, a flood of memories came rushing back. All the times Angstrom had bossed her around and humiliated her. After a moment of internal struggle, Rosemary hung up the phone and decided to resign the moment she returned. Angstrom never expected his loyal secretary would betray him at such a critical moment. With no options left, he reluctantly transferred 80 million euros into the blackmailer's account. But just as the transaction was completed, Angstrom received yet another email. The entire final chapter of Daedalus had still been published online. Angstrom flew into a rage and immediately fired a shot at Alex's chest. Alex collapsed on the floor. But fortunately, the bullet was stopped by a thick novel he had tucked into his shirt pocket and didn't injure him. Angstrom was about to fire another shot, but he was overpowered by 2 bodyguards. Seeing Angstrom losing his mind, the 2 bodyguards had already reported the situation to the board of directors of the publishing company. The board immediately ordered them to escort Angstrom to the police station for further handling. The police quickly arrested Angstrom on suspicion of intentional homicide. The surviving Alex soon arrived at the police station and met Angstrom. At this point, Angstrom was still confused. Ever since he got the novel manuscript, he had carried it with him, whether at work or home. He couldn't understand how Alex managed to steal the manuscript. Alex, upon hearing Angstrom's confusion, smiled faintly and then revealed his method. It turned out that even before entering the basement of the villa, Alex had already set his plan to steal the manuscript into motion. After observing for a long time, he noticed that Angstrom took the same subway car at 7:40 p.m. every night after work, traveling for about 15 minutes and passing through 8 stations. During this time, Angstrom would always sit and read the newspaper while the manuscript, locked in a briefcase, rested at his feet. Alex came up with the plan to steal the manuscript, and to execute it, he gathered 4 other translators as helpers: Javier, the Spanish guy with glasses; Chen, the young man from China; Thelma, the girl with a flat top from Portugal; and Ingrid, the curly-haired girl from Germany. Together, they worked on this heist. On the night of the event, disguised, Alex took a matching briefcase and entered the subway car alongside Angstrom. While Angstrom was absorbed in his newspaper, Alex swapped his briefcase with Angstrom's. At the next stop, he passed the briefcase to Chen and Javier, who ran out of the subway station and headed to a nearby printing shop. Angstrom's password was easy to guess, and in just a few seconds, the two managed to crack it. They immediately made a copy of the entire manuscript. Afterward, Chen and Javier placed the manuscript back in the briefcase. Meanwhile, Thelma drove them in pursuit of the moving subway. In their panic, Javier tripped and broke his arm as he fell while getting on the train, later getting a plaster cast for his injury. That's why, when asked about the injury, he was nervous and couldn't explain. Since the subway kept stopping and starting, the three soon caught up, and at the stop before Angstrom got off, they passed the briefcase to Ingrid, who was waiting at the subway station. Ingrid entered the subway car with the briefcase and handed it to Alex. When Angstrom's stop was nearing, Ingrid released a mouse from her bag, creating a commotion among the passengers. In the chaos, Alex swapped the briefcase back. However, when Alex recounted the plan, he deliberately withheld the names of his 4 accomplices because he noticed that Angstrom was wearing a police listening device. After hearing the entire theft plan, Angstrom finally showed a moment of realization, but soon he became suspicious. First, how did Alex know details of the final chapter of the novel before the theft? Second, how could 5 people have managed to break the code and make a full copy of the manuscript in just 15 minutes? Facing Angstrom's questions, Alex didn't immediately answer. Instead, he leaned in, covered the listening device on Angstrom's body with his hand, and then revealed an astonishing truth. Alex was actually Oscar Brack, the original author of the Daedalus series. That's why he knew the content of the final chapter in advance. As for the so-called theft plan, it was all just a charade between Alex and the other translators. In other words, Alex never swapped Angstrom's briefcase. He had simply created the mouse commotion on the subway to leave an impression on Angstrom. When Angstrom heard this, he showed an incredulous expression and couldn't help but blurt out that it was impossible. The author of the novel was clearly his teacher, whom he had pushed down the stairs to his death and whose body had been burned to ashes. Alex, upon hearing this, revealed a sad yet relieved smile. It was then that Angstrom noticed that Alex's hand, which had been holding the listening device, had relaxed. Alex hadn't lied. He was indeed the author of the Daedalus series. Although Alex was British, he had spent his childhood at his grandparents' home in France. There was a bookstore near his grandparents' house, and Alex would often spend his time there reading books. He became close friends with the bookstore owner, Georges, who had given him the novel that had blocked the bullet. When he became an adult, Alex wrote the Daedalus series, but for him, writing novels was just a hobby. He never intended to make money from it, nor did he want his peaceful life disturbed by fans. So Alex hadn't planned to publish the novel. However, Georges believed that good works should be seen by more readers. Persuaded by him, Alex changed his mind and handed over the entire manuscript to Georges to help arrange its publication. His only request was that his personal information should not be revealed to the publisher or fans. Georges chose Angstrom's publishing company as the partner. Angstrom had been a student of Georges. Since Georges had kept Alex's identity hidden, Angstrom had always believed that Georges was the author of the Daedalus series. However, neither Alex nor Georges had anticipated that Angstrom was a greedy businessman. The Daedalus series became nothing more than a tool for him to make money by any means. Alex was very upset by this, and after his strong insistence, Georges decided to end the cooperation with Angstrom. When Angstrom found out, in order to obtain the manuscript of the final chapter, he actually pushed Georges down the stairs of the bookstore, causing his death. After killing him, he set the bookstore on fire, staging it as an accidental fire, with the false pretense that Georges had died in the fire. Although the police later determined that Georges' death was accidental, Alex did not accept this conclusion. Thus, he set up the manuscript theft plan, and in the end, it was Angstrom himself who admitted to his crimes. As for the 80 million euros Angstrom had paid as a bribe, Alex had returned it to the publisher's account. As a result, the police decided not to pursue charges for his extortion. However, Angstrom would ultimately pay the price for his series of murders. The Translators is a cleverly crafted French thriller that, while occasionally overcomplicated and at times somewhat exaggerated, still captivates with its unique premise. The confinement of the characters in a high-security bunker creates a palpable sense of tension, fueled by an unknown and ever-present threat. Though it may not be entirely convincing in all aspects, its originality and suspense make it a film well worth watching.